Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be using data to uncover the hidden side of everything. We're going to be exploring Freakonomics by Stephen D. Levitt and Stephen J. Dubner. And it's a book that uses economics to understand surprising patterns in everyday life.
You might think economics is all about money, but at its heart, it's about incentives. What motivates people's actions? That's the thread that connects seemingly unrelated topics, like crime, parenting, and even sumo wrestling in this book.
Okay, so get this. One of the first things Levitt tackles is cheating teachers. And you'd think catching a cheating teacher would be pretty straightforward, but it's way more complex than just seeing a classroom with unusually high scores.
Right. Levitt developed an algorithm to analyze standardized test results from the Chicago public school system. He wasn't just looking for high scores, but for specific patterns in the answers. For example, imagine a group of students who usually struggle, all suddenly getting the same right answers on the toughest questions. That's a red flag.
It's like finding that perfectly identical strand of DNA at a crime scene. It points to something fishy going on. But how could an algorithm actually spot that? Did teachers really think they wouldn't get caught?
Well, the algorithm looked for statistical anomalies. Let's say a student usually misses a certain type of problem, but then suddenly gets it right along with a bunch of their classmates. Especially when those right answers are clustered together in a string, the odds of that happening naturally are pretty low.
So this algorithm wasn't just about catching a few bad apples. It was about using data to understand a systemic problem. What happened after they found these cheating teachers?
The school system started firing those involved, and the rate of cheating dropped significantly the next year. What's fascinating here is that the threat of getting caught acted as a powerful deterrent. It changed the incentives for teachers, making honesty the better strategy.
Okay, let's move from classrooms to the sumo ring. Now, sumo wrestling is all about honor and tradition, right? You wouldn't expect cheating to be a part of that world.
You'd think so. But Levitt found evidence suggesting otherwise. He analyzed over 30,000 sumo matches and noticed a curious pattern when one wrestler needed a win to maintain their ranking, and their opponent had nothing to lose. The wrestler who needed the win was more likely to lose.
Wait, that seems completely backward. Wouldn't the wrestler with everything on the line fight harder?
You would think so. But remember, the sumo world is incredibly tight-knit. These wrestlers train together, live together. Their careers are intertwined. Levitt suggests that there might be unspoken agreements, favors exchanged. That could influence the outcome of these crucial matches.
So even in a sport steeped in tradition and honor, the power of incentives, in this case potentially maintaining relationships and future favors, can play a hidden role. It makes you wonder what other seemingly untouchable systems have these cracks where self-interest can override the rules.
That's the beauty of looking at the world through this economic lens. It challenges our assumptions and forces us to consider the hidden motivations driving people's actions, even in the most unexpected places.
All right, ready for something a little closer to home? Let's talk about something everyone can relate to, the temptation of a free bagel. We're going to delve into the fascinating case of economist Paul Feldman and his accidental study on workplace honesty.
Feldman ran a simple business, delivering bagels to offices, leaving a box and an honor system payment box. Over time, he collected data from hundreds of offices, tracking payment rates. It turned into this incredible, real-world experiment on human behavior.
It's amazing what you can learn from a box of bagels. Did he discover that everyone was a saint when it came to paying for their breakfast?
Well, the average payment rate was pretty good, around 87%. But what's interesting is that he found certain factors that seemed to correlate with higher or lower honesty.
Like what? Was it the type of bagels? Did cinnamon raisin lead to more sticky fingers?
Not quite. One of the most interesting correlations was with office size. Smaller offices tended to be more honest than larger ones.
That's counterintuitive. You'd think in a bigger office with more anonymity, people would be more likely to get away with stealing a bagel.
Right. But Feldman theorized that in smaller offices, there's a greater sense of community and accountability. You're more likely to know your colleagues, maybe even eat lunch with them, which might make you think twice about taking something without paying.
So it's not just about being on camera. It's about that feeling of being part of a community, of having your actions reflect on a group you identify with. It makes you wonder if that's something missing in those big, anonymous corporate settings.
And it also highlights the power of subtle incentives. It might not be a huge moral dilemma to steal a bagel, but that slight discomfort of facing your colleagues knowing you didn't pay, that can be enough to sway your decision.
Speaking of things that might influence our decisions, Feldman also noticed a curious trend around holidays. Payment rates dipped. It seems even those who are generally honest felt a little less guilt about a free bagel when the holiday spirit was in the air.
It reminds us that even seemingly small factors, our mood, the context of a situation, can have an impact on our choices. This bagel experiment, as simple as it sounds, reveals some really fundamental truths about human nature.
Okay, now, for a comparison that might seem completely out there, what could the Ku Klux Klan possibly have in common with real estate agents?
It might sound strange, but they both leverage a powerful tool, information asymmetry. It's a fancy way of saying one party in a transaction knows more than the other.
Ah,
Yeah.
so like when you're buying a used car,
Yeah,
and the seller knows it's a lemon, but you don't.
exactly. And in the case of the Klan, their power stemmed from secrecy. They had this air of mystery, hidden knowledge that instilled fear and gave them control.
Those hooded robes,
Yeah.
the secret rituals, it was all about creating an illusion of power and knowledge that most people were afraid to challenge.
And to combat that, a writer and activist named Stetson Kennedy went undercover, infiltrated the Klan, and gathered their secrets, rituals, membership lists, the whole works. He then shared this information with the public, exposing the Klan for what it was.
Taking away their mystique, their information advantage, essentially pulling back the curtain and revealing the wizard was just a guy with a microphone. What a brilliant strategy.
It was incredibly effective. By spreading this information, Kennedy helped weaken the Klan's hold on communities.
So how does this connect to real estate agents? Are they holding secret meetings in hooded robes?
Hopefully not, but like the Klan, they often have access to information that buyers and sellers don't. Market trends, comparable properties, inside scoops on motivated sellers.
So they have that informational advantage. But is that inherently a bad thing? Don't they use that knowledge to help their clients?
They can, but Freakonomics highlights a study showing real estate agents often sell their own homes for a higher price after a longer time on the market than homes they sell for clients. This suggests their primary incentive might not always be getting the best deal for their client.
That makes you wonder, are they holding back information? Maybe encouraging clients to make a quick offer when they could have gotten a better deal with a little more patience. It's like that sumo wrestling situation, where unspoken incentives can sometimes cloud the supposed fairness of the system.
It's a reminder that while we might trust certain professionals to act in our best interest, it's always wise to be informed consumers, do our research, and understand the potential motivations at play. After all, knowledge is power, and in these cases, it could save you a lot of money.
Speaking of things that could save you money, or at least offer some peace of mind, Freakonomics dives into a topic that often stirs up controversy: legalized abortion and its potential link to crime rates.
This is a complex issue, and the book approaches it from a purely data-driven perspective. Levitt found a correlation between the legalization of abortion in the 1970s and a significant drop in crime rates that began in the 1990s, almost 2 decades later.
How could something that happened 20 years earlier have such a delayed impact?
It's important to remember that correlation doesn't equal causation. But Levitt theorizes that by reducing unwanted pregnancies, particularly in disadvantaged communities, there were fewer children growing up in circumstances that statistically correlate with higher crime rates, essentially by changing the circumstances surrounding births. There was a ripple effect felt years down the line.
It's a complex and sensitive topic, and the book doesn't offer easy answers, but it does highlight the power of data analysis to reveal unexpected connections and challenge assumptions about social issues.
It reminds us that even the most challenging and controversial subjects can be explored through a data-driven lens, revealing patterns that might otherwise go unnoticed.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've seen how data can expose cheating teachers, uncover hidden incentives in sumo wrestling, and reveal surprising truths about honesty in the workplace. We've even touched on the complex relationship between legalized abortion and crime rates.
And we've just scratched the surface. In the next part, we'll delve deeper into the world of Freakonomics, exploring the power of names, the surprising realities of parenting, and what data can teach us about our deepest fears.
Stay tuned, it's about to get even more interesting.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Freakonomics. We've seen how data can be used to uncover hidden patterns and challenge conventional wisdom in some pretty unexpected areas. Now, let's turn our attention to something that's deeply personal: names.
Yeah, we all have one. And most of us probably don't think too much about how our name might have shaped our lives. But Freakonomics suggests that our names can reveal a lot about our background, our parents' aspirations, and even our potential for success. It sounds crazy, But is there really that much power in a name?
Levitt dives into this by looking at baby names in California. Using it as a sort of giant social laboratory, he found a strong correlation between a baby's name and the parent's socioeconomic status. High-income, highly educated parents tend to choose less common names, often with historical or literary significance, while lower-income parents often choose names that are more trendy and popular at the time.
So you're saying there's a name gap that mirrors the income gap. Like if
Yeah.
you meet a little Ophelia at a playground, it's a safe bet her parents are probably browsing the shelves at an independent bookstore on the weekends.
The data certainly suggests that. And it's not just about blindly following trends, it's also about aspirations. Parents choose names that reflect their hopes and dreams for their child, names that signal certain values or traits.
So you're saying a name can be like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you name your kid after a successful entrepreneur,
Yeah.
they're more likely to become one themselves.
It's not quite that direct, but names can send subtle signals that influence how people perceive others, and even how they perceive themselves. Think about it. If you meet someone with a name that sounds sophisticated or unique, you might subconsciously make certain assumptions about their background or intelligence.
It's like when you see a really well-dressed person walking into a job interview.
Yeah.
You automatically assume they're more competent, even though you know nothing about their actual qualifications. First impressions matter, and names are part of that first impression. But does this mean that people with less trendy or unique names are at a disadvantage?
That's a complex question, and Freakonomics delves into this by exploring the impact of what Levitt calls distinctly black names, names that are statistically much more likely to be given to black children. He found that while having a distinctly black name doesn't necessarily lead to lower wages, it does raise questions about potential bias and discrimination.
So a name can be a marker of identity, and unfortunately, that can sometimes lead to prejudice, whether conscious or unconscious. It's a reminder that even in a society that claims to value diversity and inclusion, our subconscious biases can still influence how we perceive others.
It's a sobering thought, and Freakonomics doesn't shy away from these uncomfortable truths. It also highlights the conscious choices some black parents make when choosing distinctly black names for their children. It can be a way of embracing their cultural identity, celebrating their heritage, and connecting with their community.
It's like reclaiming those names, imbuing them with a sense of pride and power. It's a statement that says, this is who we are, and we're not going to conform to societal pressures to fit in.
Exactly, and it underscores the importance of recognizing the richness and diversity of names and identities. We need to be aware of potential biases and work towards a society where a name doesn't predetermine someone's opportunities. But we also need to respect individual choices and the power of names to connect people to their heritage and culture.
So what does all this mean for parents who are agonizing over baby name books? Should they be researching the socioeconomic connotations of every name on their list?
I don't think it needs to be that extreme. The takeaway here isn't to overanalyze every potential name or try to game the system. It's about recognizing that names carry meaning, both positive and negative, and that those meanings can be shaped by social and cultural forces.
It's about being mindful of the messages our choices might send, and understanding that a name is just one small piece of a much larger and more complex story.
Exactly. Now, speaking of complex stories, let's shift gears and talk about a topic that's near and dear to many of us: parenting. We've already talked about how much parents matter. But what about all those specific things parents do? The choices they make, the activities they schedule, do those really have a big impact on a child's success?
Yeah, there's so much pressure on parents these days to do all the right things. Reading to your kids every night, limiting screen time, enrolling them in every enrichment activity imaginable. But what does the data say about the actual impact of these actions? Are we all just running ourselves ragged for nothing?
Freakonomics takes a data-driven approach to this question, analyzing information from the Early Childhood Longitudinal Study, which tracked thousands of children over time. And what Levitt found might surprise you. Many of the things parents obsess over, like reading bedtime stories, taking kids to museums, and limiting TV, showed little to no correlation with improved academic performance.
Wait, are you saying all those parenting gurus and experts have been leading us astray? What about all those articles about the importance of educational activities and quality family time?
It's not that those things are bad, but the data suggests they might not be the magic bullet we've been led to believe. Remember, correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because a child whose parents read to them regularly does well in school doesn't mean it was the reading that caused the success. There might be other factors at play, like having highly educated parents who value learning, and expose their children to a variety of experiences.
So it's not about micromanaging our kids' every move or trying to force-feed them knowledge. It's about creating a nurturing environment where they can learn and grow at their own pace.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is that the data suggests who you are as a parent matters more than those specific techniques you try to master.
So it's less about being a helicopter parent and more about being a solid foundation, a stable and supportive presence in your child's life. What are some of those key factors that make a difference, those things that parents can actually control?
Well, as we discussed earlier, parents' education level is a strong predictor of a child's success. Children of highly educated parents tend to perform better academically, likely because they're exposed to a wider vocabulary, more stimulating conversations, and a general emphasis on learning.
So knowledge really is power. Even when it comes to parenting, it's not just about what you teach your kids directly. It's about modeling a love of learning and creating a home environment where curiosity is valued. What else plays a role?
Socioeconomic status is another significant factor. Children from families with higher incomes tend to have access to better schools, more educational resources, and enriching experiences that can give them an advantage.
That makes sense. It's hard to focus on your education when you're worried about basic needs like food and shelter. It highlights the systemic inequalities that can impact a child's life chances, even before they set foot in a classroom.
Absolutely. And here's another factor that might surprise you: the mother's age at the birth of her first child. The data shows that children born to older mothers tend to perform better academically.
That's interesting. Is it because older mothers are more mature, more financially stable, or is there something else at play?
It's likely a combination of factors. Older mothers often have more life experience, they're more likely to be financially secure, and they may also be more emotionally prepared for the challenges of parenthood.
So it's not just about being there physically, it's about being present mentally and emotionally, creating a stable and nurturing environment where a child can thrive.
Exactly. And it's important to note that this isn't meant to discourage younger parents or suggest that they can't raise successful children. It's simply about recognizing that a parent's life stage and circumstances can play a role in a child's development.
Okay, so we've learned that a parent's education, socioeconomic status,
Yeah.
and even their age can impact a child's success. But what about those direct actions, the things parents do day in and day out? Are there any specific parenting techniques that actually make a difference?
This is where things get really interesting and maybe a little controversial. Freakonomics suggests that some of the things we traditionally associate with good parenting, like having a regular family dinner or enforcing strict rules, might not have the impact we think they do.
Wait, are you saying those family dinners where everyone's supposed to share their feelings and those carefully crafted chore charts are all for naught?
The data doesn't necessarily support those claims. Now, don't get me wrong. Creating structure and spending time together as a family are important, but Levitt argues that we often mistake correlation for causation. For example, a family that has regular dinners might also be a family that values communication and connection, and it might be those underlying values, rather than the dinner itself, that contribute to a child's well-being.
So it's less about rigidly following a set of rules and more about creating a family culture that fosters positive relationships and supports a child's development. It's about being intentional about our choices, but also recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to parenting.
Exactly, and that's really the overarching message of Freakonomics. It encourages us to challenge our assumptions, look beyond the surface, and use data to make more informed decisions, whether we're choosing a baby name, navigating the world of real estate, or trying to figure out this whole parenting thing.
So we've talked about cheating teachers, sumo wrestlers, bagels,
Yeah.
real estate agents, even abortion and crime rates. It seems like Freakonomics covers just about everything under the sun. What's next on our agenda?
In the last part of our deep dive, we'll explore how Freakonomics tackles a universal human experience: fear. We'll look at how our perceptions of risk often don't match reality, and how understanding those mismatches can help us make better decisions.
Intriguing. I'm ready to face my fears, armed with data and a healthy dose of skepticism. Welcome back to our deep dive into Freakonomics. We've uncovered hidden patterns in everything from sumo wrestling to baby names, but now it's time to tackle something a bit more, well, primal: fear.
Fear is a powerful emotion. It keeps us safe from danger, but it can also lead us astray, especially when our fears don't align with the actual risks we face.
Yeah, like, ugh. Those folks who are terrified of flying but think nothing of texting while driving, statistically. They're far more likely to have an accident on the road. But the fear just doesn't seem to match up. Why is that?
Freakonomics suggests it's often about perceived control. In a car, You feel like you're in the driver's seat, literally, but in a plane. You're surrendering control to the pilot and all those mysterious forces of aerodynamics. It feels riskier, even if it statistically isn't.
So it's not just about the odds. It's about that gut feeling, that sense of being vulnerable. But this fear mismatch, as Freakonomics calls it, doesn't just apply to planes and cars. What are some other examples where our fears might be leading us astray?
Levitt highlights the example of swimming pools versus guns. Statistically, children are far more likely to drown in a swimming pool than be killed by a gun, yet most people perceive guns as a far greater threat.
That's kind of shocking, to be honest. I mean, guns are designed to kill. They're often associated with violence and crime, and they definitely seem scarier than a backyard pool. But the data doesn't lie. Why do you think we get this so wrong?
It might be about how the media portrays these dangers. Gun violence is often sensationalized, making it feel more prevalent than it actually is, while drownings, though tragic, don't often make headline news. This skewed perception can lead us to make irrational decisions.
Like investing in expensive home security systems, while neglecting to put a fence around the pool.
Exactly. It's a reminder that our fears, while often valid, can sometimes be misplaced, leading us to focus on the wrong dangers. Freakonomics encourages us to be more aware of these biases, to challenge our assumptions about risk, and to make decisions based on evidence rather than gut feelings.
Yes, it's about taking a step back, doing a bit of research, and maybe even questioning those sensationalized headlines. It's about being informed and rational, even when it comes to our fears.
Right. Freakonomics isn't about dismissing our fears altogether. It's about understanding them, recognizing their potential to distort our perception of risk, and using data and logic to make more informed choices.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Freakonomics, what are some of the key takeaways you hope our listeners will remember?
Well, the book reminds us that the world is full of hidden patterns and unexpected connections. It encourages us to question conventional wisdom, to look beyond the surface, and to be open to surprising, even uncomfortable truths.
It's about approaching the world with a healthy dose of curiosity and skepticism, always asking why, and seeking out the data to back up our assumptions.
And it's about recognizing the power of incentives, those often unseen forces that shape human behavior, sometimes in ways we might not expect.
Whether it's teachers tempted to cheat, sumo wrestlers striking deals, or parents agonizing over baby names, incentives are everywhere, influencing our choices in subtle but significant ways.
Freakonomics encourages us to be more aware of these incentives, both in our own lives and in the systems around us.
It's a reminder that the world is a complex and fascinating place, full of surprises and counterintuitive truths.
And by embracing data and a questioning mind, we can uncover those hidden patterns and gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
So the next time you're faced with a decision, big or small, take a moment to consider the incentives at play.
Ask yourself, what are the motivations driving the people involved? What are the potential unintended consequences?
And don't be afraid to challenge conventional wisdom. After all, as Freakonomics has shown us, the truth is often stranger and far more interesting than we might think. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden side of everything.
Until next time, stay curious.